Welcome to the roller coaster of midlife. I'm your host, Lucie Q. Now, grief is the exchange that we make for having loved. It's the echo of the heartbeats and the laughter we once shared, a testament to the connections that run soul deep. Grief is a journey that takes us to the depths of sorrow, where we have to find our way back and to continue creating a meaningful life. Joining me today is Dr. Clare Biedenharn. With over 20 years as a chaplain in diverse sectors like critical care and organ donation, she has truly made her mark. An ordained United Methodist minister, Clare doesn't just preach, she reaches. Her journey with grief doesn't just stop with her profession. After the heartbreak of losing her husband in 2018, Clare channeled her pain and experience to assist others. Her work with an assisted care facility led to her second book, Reflect, Reconnect, Restore, Healing from Secondary Grief. Welcome back, Clare.
Thank you, Lucie. It's so good to see you again.
And I'm saying welcome back because we tried to record this last week and my internet decided to take its own little vacation.
What can we say?
Yeah, we're dependent on it.
Technology is great as long as it works.
And it was not working last week.
No.
So I want to just take a step back because grief is a very tough subject for a lot of people, and to continuously be immersed in that world can have its own weight that it carries. Can you maybe share with us how you started having grief and helping people through the grief process? How did that start for you?
I as a chaplain and working in critical care, and as I was also a hospice chaplain, so I've been around grief, where been around families' grief, but also my own and the staff. The healthcare providers who are supporting the patient get attached, and when that person dies, often they're affected too. But what really changed my journey was on the day I was defending my dissertation in Chicago. My husband was getting his scan in New Orleans for what turned out to be terminal cancer. And it's one that, suddenly it was personal. I knew all the steps of grief. We know and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was an incredible person to come up with these steps about. But I think that in our logical minds, we go, oh, okay, well, step number 1, step number 2. No. And she never intended it to be that way. But it's something that keeps coming again. So I was suddenly faced with, how do I support my husband, still do my job, and but also, we were married 41 years. I picked James up at a coffee shop in New Orleans. He walked in, he was so cute. I had to say hello. But so I was lucky to have a project. My mission is to help stressed out healthcare providers reconnect with their call to service. I want to help them find their joy again. But the whole time James was sick, I just put my stuff aside and I thought, well, I'll do what I can, As you said, Lucie, grief is so hard. And it's that kind of like that gift that keeps on giving. It doesn't just go away. So what got me out of bed after James died was this project where I'm going to show off a minute. I wrote this book, And it was based on a listening study I did with healthcare providers in New Orleans.
And for anybody that's listening to the audio version, the book is called Heart to Heart.
And so that got me out. And then, but it's just, I'd lost my husband within 3 years. My mother died, my brother died, my husband died, my dog died. And we were in New Orleans, my second hometown, before we came home. I had a job I loved. We had just renovated our home. But I wanted my husband to have a good death.
Did you know it was terminal when he got that scan?
It was, I think God is good, because I think back now, here I was in a hospital environment talking to people. I go, these critical care nurses I talk to every day, and I'd say, well, and then this scan, blah, blah, blah. And they'd say, well, yeah. I to be perfectly honest, I knew we were in trouble and that I wasn't going to like the way the story ended. But it wasn't until we moved. And so we moved back home to the Louisville, Kentucky area where my family was, because we needed support. But that oncologist told me that James had thymic cancer, which is right behind your breastbone. He said for every 1,000 cases of lung cancer, there's one of thymic. So there weren't any, studies done, no trial. But I think too, what I sensed from my experience of being a chaplain caregiver, I decided that I just knew in my heart that unless I waded through the grief, I wasn't going to get past that point. And one day, the director of geriatric psych at the hospital where I work took me aside, and he said, well, how are you doing? And, a good old Southern lady, me, oh, I'm fine. And he's like, no. He said, you realize the caretakers often die before the patient. And in my mind, my internal reaction was, I'm not going down with the ship. So I knew, people were being nice, but I could tell we were in some deep stuff, and I guess that's just part of the journey. Sometimes, I look back, it's so easy to look back and say, why did we do all that treatment that led to heart failure, that led to dementia? And what happened to, we kept talking about quality of life and what happened, but it's that slow, you make one decision at a time based on the information you have. But so anyway, and I'm working with organ donor families. I'm the designated requester. I'm the one who has to ask if they're not on the registry. I was the one who had to ask the families of people about organ donation.
You see that happen in TV shows and in movies. And I always wonder about that person, because I think that has got to be one of the worst jobs.
It's the toughest job I ever had.
Yeah. Because essentially the person is still alive. They're still clinging to hope. But you have to be that voice of reason and say, okay, but they can live on and help others in this way.
And really, we don't approach them until they understand that it's the person's
time.
It's dying. And because so many times the hardest part is, even if they're on the registry and we'll say, well, we have to wait till they are declared brain dead. And there's a whole process. Doctors have to agree, tests, all this, And so even with the best of intentions, you're asking so much of the family to wait.
Mm.
The person's there in the bed, the patient's in the bed, looks like they're sleeping with, have a lot of machine. So it's, yeah, it's pretty tough. But then it is so cool when, like, especially when the person's, and I don't know how it is in Canada or other countries, but here in the United States, like if I signed up for my driver's license, they asked me if I want to be an organ donor. Well, I'm making the decision at that point. So
Yes.
on the registry. So sometimes, a lot of times, I'm telling the families your person's on the registry and they may not have known it. But so many times they're just this sense of peace and just helps them reframe the worst possible part of their life. And it's like so many times, yes, whatever, yeah, they wanted it, we're in.
Yeah, and certainly when it's the person's choice, you're taking that burden off of
Yes.
the family. Unfortunately, in the province where I live, they have actually placed a law that it is organ donation is assumed. So regardless if they've actually anybody has signed anything, it's assumed that the government can do it. I
Oh.
don't know all of the ins and outs because it seems a bit sketchy to me. But I can see how having signed it, agreeing to it, it it makes it easier
Yeah.
because you're not having to decide, okay, for lack of a better term, pull the plug.
Yeah. Yeah.
That decision has already been made for you. So I can see how the challenge arises when that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, and what's remarkable is that with donation, I mean, there are the obvious organs, but counting tissue and bone and all, one person can help over 200 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can say, and look, anybody who's had I have cadaver bone in my jaw because one of my teeth did something weird. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, donor, or the ACL operations. I mean, that can be to burn victims. And the thing that's a lot of times people get upset about is they're afraid that the person can't be. They say, what are they going to look like? If we want to have an open casket,
Right.
well, they one thing with skin, it's like the very top level. I mean, and they take it off the back, so you can have an open casket. It's you can do what you want to do, and so it's a remarkable thing. And so it was. I think it wouldn't have been so tough if my personal situation hadn't been ongoing, and then in the middle of that, one of my son's wives had a miscarriage. I mean, it was just like,
Oh, wow, you got it all at once.
Yeah. But
now, earlier you mentioned secondary grief. Can
yes,
you maybe share what that is and how that affects us?
sure enough. So let's think about, like, say you're walking along, going down a nice little path, and you see a nice pond. And you pick up a stone and you throw the stone into this nice pond. And then the rock disappears. Well, you think about, okay, the force and just that sensation of that rock slapping the surface of the water. That's like that initial grief. That's that take away your breath, bring you to your knees.
That moment of loss.
Yes, yeah. But the thing is, the stone sinks to the bottom. You might not see it. It's still there. That's your grief still there. But also think about the ripples from that stone going down, that ripples coming across. And the ripples are like the secondary grief. I saw it so much, like working with the donor families, say somebody is a young guy messes up on his motorcycle. and he's married and his wife's pregnant and they have a kid. Well, suddenly, not only are you losing your spouse or your loved one, but maybe that's if you're a stay-at-home mom, that's your income. What do you do about that? How are you going to pay for the funeral? I mean, especially with young people, they think they're bulletproof. Where's the life insurance? I mean, hopefully they got some insurance through work at least. But and then for me, and the challenge through all of this for me was to not go professional, not go up in my head, and but to stay centered and engaged with my grief. And so, like for me, that about a couple of months afterwards, I guess I had to call about something about my husband's pension. And this man on the phone was so nice, and he said, "And what's his social security number?" And I couldn't speak. And then I was like, and but it's that it comes again. It's one time I was, after James died, I call them the blindside hits. Those things that trigger you, a song, a thought, or something. And one day I was on my way to go talk to an organ donor family, and I got slammed. I mean, a song came on the radio, and I started crying, and I thought, I can't go talk to these people with a tear-stained face, And so I just pulled over, and God and I had a talk. I mean, I feel like my husband's around. I feel his presence a lot. But that day I pulled over. I said, "Okay, y'all, we can't be having these blindside hits like this. It's too hard." And they finally backed off. But I think that grief is so painful, and our natural inclination is to avoid it, to don't think about it, or start eating too much, or spending money, or hitting the smokes a little bit too much, or some booze. But that's numbing it.
Yeah,
it's postponing it. And I think too that one thing about with James, I guess pretty early on, I knew we were, as they say, up the creek. But I thought, I'm going to do everything I can to support him. So we went to, Houston. We went to the cancer clinic. We did everything. But I felt like somehow in my bones that I was, that was the way out. And now I can say, I know we did everything we possibly could. And that helped me with my grief, because I don't feel guilty.
Yeah, because in your heart of hearts, you didn't leave anything on the table.
No. Yeah. And that was one thing about the move from my dream job to this really hard job, and leaving so much that I loved. But I thought, as a critical care chaplain, as a hospice chaplain, that I've helped people, been present when people died. And I thought, I can help people have a good death. I read to them. I sing them songs, and I thought, how can I do less for my husband? And he died surrounded by people who loved him, and music, and on Good Friday.
Wow. What is it with you and timing? I think you need to have a chat with the angels and ask for them.
He died at 2:59 on Good Friday. And for those Christians might know that, Jesus supposedly rose, he died at 3. Somebody said, yeah, James wanted to get out of town before the big guy.
Yeah, I think you need to chat with the angels on that one, Claire. I think you've had your fair share of tough lessons.
Well, and then the thing is, with it being on Good Friday, so that date changes every year. So I have the anniversary of his death with and which is, and for those who are grieving, I know it's hard right now, but it does get better. It does. But so we've got the actual date, and then we've got Good Friday. So it's the double whammy.
You kind of get a double reminder of it. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So everything that you've been through, you were helping people with grief prior to losing James, and then you lost James.
Yeah.
How did that experience change how you're now helping people with their grief?
I think that the big thing is, well, when it's, having, so I'm, as you mentioned, I'm a Methodist minister, and I served the local church for 10 years before I went into full-time chaplaincy. And I guess I didn't, I've been, I visited my church people, and I did, a lot of funerals and got, connected to them. I really regret, I don't regret much, but as I look back on that time, that I didn't tend to the families more, because I didn't realize what they were going through, or their fears, or because especially with the preacher, everybody puts on a good face. That, and before you show up, they dust off the Bible and put it on the coffee table.
Well, it's really, from my experience, I wasn't raised with my grandparents. We're immigrants, so it was really only sort of my core family.
Mhm.
And the first, real loss that we experienced was when my father-in-law died like 15 years ago.
Mhm.
And he died in his 60s. He was young. And I think the hardest thing was what my husband coined, it's the year of firsts.
Yes, exactly.
And it's
Exactly.
that first holiday, that first birthday, and you go through all of the firsts. And
Yes.
it's you mentioned having the Good Friday and the anniversary, but it's really every family event.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just it's another ripple that's hitting you and hitting you. And I
Mm.
think that's what people don't necessarily remember, that grief lingers and pops up in odd ways. And you also, to counterbalance that, you also have odd moments of absolute crazy laughter at perhaps inopportune times,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
especially during funeral services.
Okay,
That does
especially
happen.
grieving.
um but and I think for anybody on the outside looking into somebody grieving, is to not stand in judgment,
Yes.
because you don't know what they're actually thinking and feeling. You don't know how it's affected them, how deeply it's affected them, or
Mhm.
maybe they're in a place in their life where it's a little bit easier for them to say goodbye because of whatever beliefs and systems that they hold in place. And I think that's the most important thing, is that when it comes to loss, is to just not stand there in judgment.
That's a really good point. And I think as you were saying that, I thought, at least in the United States, you get a day or two off from work so you can go to your family's funeral, and that's it.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's cruel. I mean,
It is. And there's, I've heard a lot of people say that they were also grateful to be
how,
able to get back to some semblance of normalcy,
yeah,
because in some communities it can be dwelled on a little too much for some people.
okay, that's a good point. That's
And
good.
and again, that all comes down to, we're all individuals and we all handle these things differently. And if you're good with one day, cool. If you need 3 or 4, yeah, totally get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing is too that I thought about, I mean, it's something you said made me think of this, is that, like, as I said, my daughter-in-law had a miscarriage and she was, fairly far along. And I don't think
There's no grief permitted with that one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And after that happened, I have one son who lives in Detroit and has two wonderful grandbaby boys. And then my other son is an Episcopal priest in Memphis with two wonderful baby girls. But after this happened to our family, the son who's the Episcopal minister had a service at his church and for lost children.
Yes.
And he said it was remarkable how many people came. And he said, like, older couples. And, you'd think, I wonder why they never had kids.
They did.
They did. And one lady came up to him and said, there was a place in the service where you could speak your child's name. She said, I have not said his name in 20 years.
Wow.
But I think again, naming it, and that's
you have to name it to release it for sure.
Yeah, that's it.
You do. And that was maybe her gift after 20 years, was to name it and let him go. Yeah. Now, Claire, you have a little gift for our listeners.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it is. And this is downloadable from my website. And it's called 5 Ways to Get Through Today. And the focus, when you look at my website, it looks like all I do is work with nurses or healthcare providers. But I want you to know on my book, on the reviews that I have on the Amazon, there are actually more people responding who just want to learn how to connect better with people with listening. So you don't have to be a nurse or a healthcare provider to get some good out of this. But what it is just, okay, like say you're having a bad day. For whatever reason, maybe there's just a lot of stuff being thrown at you on a particular day. But first of all, think about this. Okay, just catch yourself. Stop for a minute and breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. And you're changing the energy. And if you breathe out just a little bit longer than you breathe in, then that kind of helps break that anxiety loop that's roaring around in your head. And even if so, take a deep breath and just change your mood. If you're at the desk, get up and just step away. Go to the bathroom. If you're at work, go to the break room. Something that change it just a little bit. And so that's the next step. Become aware. Catch yourself. You focus on just right here and right now. Yes, the loved one will always be with you. My husband's great aunt lost both of her sons and fairly early. And she said, I think about them every day. And so they're with you, but they don't have to be with you in that very moment. It's okay to say, in fact, one time, and when James was having his scan and I was getting ready to walk into this room to defend my dissertation, and I was so worried about him. And in my mind, I said, now, James, I need you to get in this box for just about an hour. I promise I'll come back and worry again in about an hour, but I can't get distracted right now. So, but the thing is, it's catch yourself, because so many times when we're caught up in our grief, caught up in our anxiety, we just respond. It's like we're on autopilot. And when you can catch yourself, you want to be your authentic self. So if you're talking to somebody, it's you speaking, not your grief. Not that strong. And then and consider your resources. There are, as I found out that afterwards, and I see the wisdom in not doing anything for a year afterwards, because I was thinking you'd mentioned anniversaries. On the first Good Friday anniversary, made it through his death date. but I was working. I was training somebody. Thank God that morning they said, "Well, I think I've got it. Just let me, do it all day and you just observe." Well, thank God she said that, because I really, as we say in the South, I had to come apart. I mean, I wasn't myself. In fact, at one point, I even wondered if I was having a stroke. I was just, it was weird. It was just weird. But but you think about your resources. So you think about who are the people around you who are supporting you. It's okay to tell them those stories again. It's okay to that I found after James died, and the last few weeks were really tough. And at first, that's all I could remember. And I thought, wait, is this the way it's going to be? I'm only going to have bad memories about him. But then, like in the funeral and just talking to people who knew him and laughing, telling jokes about him, that helped me draw me away from that and back into the person that I knew. So another thing is stay nimble. Listen, my financial planner that my good old son got me hooked up with was telling me, he said, I work with a lot of widows, but they're stuck. They've worked their whole lives putting money away, saving for retirement. Well, they expected to be retiring with their husbands, and now they're frozen in grief. So, sometimes in the middle of my grief, I think, okay, for today, do I choose life or do I choose death? So death could be, I've told my kids, I said, look, would have been really easy for me to curl up on the couch and wait for your dad to come get me. I could have, but I was lucky because I had this project. And so that kept me moving forward. That helped me keep moving. So every day when I chose life. And then be confident about your strengths, but also your limitations. Hey, it's okay not to be perfect. Believe it or not, I'm not perfect. And you know what I love about the wisdom that comes as we into the golden years? I like myself. And I know that there has been a lesson from all this grief. And I found out that, even after 41 years of being yoked to one of the coolest guys I know, that I can manage on my own. I can support myself. But, and so, anyway, hang in there.
There's a lot of wisdom packed in those words. So if you want to get your copy of 5 Steps to Get Through Today, make sure you head over to Clare's website. I am going to have all of those links in the show notes, so make sure you check those out. My goal for the roller coaster of midlife is to empower women like you to thrive in this amazing chapter of our lives. So go on, embrace the adventure, and start rocking midlife like the badass that you know that you are. If you've enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend, because our greatest power is in our community. Don't forget to visit my website, therollercoasterpodcast.com, and click on Start Here to get your free audio course, 3 Steps to Go from Hot Mess to Badass and Start Rocking Midlife. I'd like to thank you, my listeners, for choosing to join us today. And Clare, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, Lucie. Thank you so much.
And until next time, keep riding the roller coaster and embracing the adventure of midlife.